contained. It's burned about 2,500 acres. In baseball, Tampa Bay won again, beating Boston 7-2. The Rays are now 11-0 to start the season. A season with quicker games.
Seventh inning stretch. Some fans might sing, "Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack," and a cold beer, too. And no rush to get in line. Because Major League Baseball games are running around a half hour faster this year, thanks to the new pitch clock, some teams are balancing the shortfall of time for concession sales by extending the clock for fans to purchase alcohol. Traditionally, concession stands cut off sales of booze after the seventh inning for safety reasons because many fans drive home. But a handful of Major League teams, the Brewers, Diamondbacks, Orioles, Rangers, and Twins, have extended alcohol sales this season through the eighth inning.
That's Fox's Jared Max. I'm Dave Anthony. This is Fox News.
It's time for WPTV's First Alert Weather from the WPTV News Channel 5 newsroom. Now with 7 meteorologists covering the Treasure and Gold Coasts 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now here's WPTV's First Alert meteorologist.
Scattered thunderstorms for the rest of the afternoon and into the evening as well. Temperatures this morning in the low 70s and then highs only in the upper 70s. Those winds today out of the east, 25 to 30 miles per hour, could gust up to 35 miles per hour, and it will remain breezy through tonight. There still could be a few thunderstorms going into tonight. Overnight lows in the low 70s. More showers and storms for your Thursday and Friday. I'm WPTV First Alert meteorologist Jennifer Correa for WSTU 1450, Martin County's Heritage Station.
You are listening to WSTU, Stewart, Jensen Beach, Hope Sound, Martin County's Heritage Station.
It's time now for the Casey Ingram Show on WSTU. The opinions expressed are those of the program host and guest and not necessarily those of WSTU. WSTU does not endorse products that may be mentioned. Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WSTU. It's time to call in with your questions and comments at 220-9788, 220-WSTU. And now, here's Casey Ingram.
Good morning and welcome back. It's it's been actually really blustery out here lately, you know. It's been crazy weather, but we got a little rain coming in, but I think it's going to be nice this weekend. So we got a great show on tap, folks. We're going to just be updating you on some bills that have been going through Tallahassee that have caught the media's attention or our eyes. I've got Mike Syrkus here in the studio with me, and it's kind of midway through session, a good time to really catch up on what's happening with bills, and is there time to still write your legislators? And some bills there isn't. Some bills, most bills there is time. But before we go into that, I want to thank Indiantown Marina. It's one of South Florida's best boat storage facilities located inland on the Okeechobee Waterway. Very well protected hurricane hull. Won't talk about it today, but season's coming. And also remember, it's a do-it-yourself and full-service boatyard. And I know as a boat owner, if you have a boat, you're going to need service pretty much all the time. So if you need any work done, electrical, bottom painting, anything, boat sitting, whatever you need, give the good folks at Indiantown Marina a call, 772-631-3272. 631-3272, and they'll be happy to help you out. And also don't forget about that best kept secret in Martin County. If you've been down there, you've been seeing some renovations and it's changing, but it's still a lot of fun. Come by boat, car, or stroll the boardwalk and explore what the best kept secret has to offer. What is the best kept secret? The Fish House Art Center down in Port Salerno, which we call the Pocket. You can look them up online, thefishhouseartcenter.com, before you head out, or give them a call, 772-221-5482. So as your spring break friends are down and friends and family are visiting, really fun spot to go. It's got boat charters, a marina, craft and creamery, 24 flavors of ice cream, bike rentals, just paddle boards. There's really something there for the whole family. So a fun little spot to go check out here in Martin County, and a great little corner of it too that's still a little quiet sometimes. And also commercial mortgage. I want to thank you as well. I don't have your ad today, but they are working a lot with foreclosures and repurposing properties as well as financing, all financing for multifamily, anything commercial. So you want to give those good folks a call at 561-310-5295. They've been in business for over 2 decades. And if you're needing help with your commercial business, Commercial Mortgage is the one to call. And all consultations are free, so it doesn't hurt to pick up that phone. Again, 561-310-5295. Visit them online, commercialmortgagellc.com. In the studio with me today is Mike Syrkus. Mike is a near lifelong resident of Martin County, having moved here as a child and leaving only for college and starting his culinary career. Today, Mike works as a carpenter as well as a substitute teacher at his children's school. His community experience includes being a leader in the church's youth group, former board member of the Republican Executive Committee, and former board member of the Martin County Farm Bureau. Mike currently volunteers for the Martin County Black History Initiative, doing historical research and engages in political advocacy at the state and federal levels. In his downtime, which I don't think he has much, Mike enjoys traveling the state, sharing its natural and historic wonders with his wife and children. So welcome back here to another show, Mike. I enjoy having you. You're a repeat guest because you are just one of the most well-informed citizens of Martin County.
Oh, I don't know about most well-informed of Martin County.
That's my opinion, and we're going with it.
Okay, I'm gonna take that. You are the authority in here. I just enjoy the conversation, so thank you for having me back.
There's a lot of great things coming on, and before we get into the bills, Martin GOP, the Republican Party of Martin County, is going to have a wonderful, and it's a lot of fun, folks. It's a picnic in the park. It's coming up on Saturday, April 29th. It goes from noon to 3. Again, Indian Riverside Park, and tickets are just, I think, $20, and kids are $5, but they do sell out, so I highly recommend that you email events@martingop.com, events@martingop.com, or call Patty at 732-991-5483. Sponsorships are available, vendor booths. It's just a ton of fun, a lot of family fun, food and games. So you want to check that out, April 29th, Indian Riverside Park, supporting our Martin GOP. All right, Mike. So here we are.
Here we are
I've
again.
been covering a couple bills already in Tallahassee. Mayor Troy McDonald was in here last week and
Yes,
spoke
ma'am.
about a bill that could impact some trash, refuse, and recyclable prices. But there's so many other bills that are going up there. How many are up there this year?
So we were just talking a few minutes ago. It's surprising to see this session where we got about 3 weeks left, and there's only 1,700 bills in the House and Senate.
Sounds crazy, I
community.
know, but how many were there last year?
That's over the last 5 years. You're usually averaging the upper 2,000s, lower 3,000s.
Incredible. So almost half as many.
Almost half as many, which kind of goes to explain why it is that we've seen as productive a session as we have. I mean, we got a little over the halfway mark now, and it's interesting to see some of the real big priorities have not only gone through all committees, gone to the House floor, Senate floor, but also been signed by the governor. So, I mean, it's
Yes.
I know there's a lot of people that ideologically may not like what they've seen go through the commission or go through the state so far this legislative session, but it's been very impressive to see how efficient, how streamlined the process has been this session.
It truly has. And like you said, it surprised me as well. Usually you're expecting the governor's signature after session, but some of the bills have been signed already. So they are
So
either
many of these
law
high
or coming to law.
profile, you know, you sit back and you'll wonder, okay, you only have 5 days left or 8 or 9 days left, and you know in the back of your head you have one legal responsibility every legislative session, and that's it. That's to pass a balanced budget. And then every 10 years, redistricting for census purposes. But that's essentially the only two hard and fast, you must do these. So to sit back with only a handful of days left and wonder, okay, are these going to make it to the floor? Are they not going to make it to the floor? To see so many high profile already signed by the governor, it's pretty eye-opening this
There's
session.
definitely priorities, aren't there? And those are through.
Most
So
definitely.
I wanted to touch on some bills. One of them, this is the fun one of the fun bills. I thought it was a ridiculous
capital
bill. Yes, exactly.
I don't even know which one you're looking at
I know
right
you
now.
don't. Well, it was a ridiculous
I can
bill.
just tell.
It was like, so I have 2 dogs, and they love to hang their head out the window.
I already know.
Does anybody's dog not like to do that? And this bill actually included, they didn't want the dog to sit on your lap. It had some other stipulations, but the one thing was the dog can't hang its head out the window.
It's nuts, this animal welfare bill that Senator Lauren Book, that
Yes.
had put
Yep.
this one forward. And actually, it's kind of interesting. You sent me a list of things that you were interested in, and one of them that you're interested in is something that Senator Book was actually arrested for last week. And you guys are on the same page on this particular measure.
The abortion bill.
The abortion bill. You guys are both
That's
against the bill.
Yes.
And, so it's funny to see. Sometimes in life we'll have something that we were absolutely 100% opposed to somebody on, and the same token, that very same person, you're 100% on the same page. So
and Mike, that's a funny thing you're saying there too, because she's a Democrat,
she
a Republican, but
Minority
sometimes
leader.
That's where. That's actually one thing in the Republican Party. I don't go down party line. It's not the only thing, but that's one major thing for me that I've always wished they just, particularly this last year, that they just would have let Roe v. Wade alone. So.
Well, we're going to get in that soon.
They didn't. So, yes.
But yeah, I mean, the animal control one, or I should say animal welfare bill, this is an interesting one to look at, because this is what I like to compare to log rolling different topics into one subject.
Yes.
We have a big issue with this on constitutional amendments. A few years back, several were knocked off the ballot after ballots were printed because they were log rolled. But, we use a topic like the animal welfare, looking at no cosmetic testing on animals and some very high quality ideas that you're going to want to see go forward. But then you throw in some curveball like you can't have your dog with its head out the window,
right,
or dogs can't be cannot be transported in the cargo area of a vehicle. I'm not saying put your animal in the trunk. That is a terrible idea. Please don't do that. Having said that, my wife has an SUV and the dog sits in the back, the same place my girls sit petting his head while we're riding.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
When you start mixing some of these things together, you almost ask yourself, why would you even put forward a bill of such conflicting nonsense?
Absolutely right. You're losing some really good legislation when you put in what we like to call pork or unnecessary items.
And that's where we see that bill was filed, it was introduced, but here we are with about 3 weeks left in the session, and that's it.
It is when committee. It did it. That's right. It's sitting there.
Even with how quickly things have progressed in the House and Senate, I would be shocked to see that go anywhere this year, because it has that kind of pork thrown in there.
That's right. And I don't think it will either. It's just been sitting there. There's been no votes on it. So another bill that so far is in that same status, SB 1240. Now, that had a lot of local concern here. It was land and water management, prohibiting counties and municipalities from adopting laws, regulation, rules, or policies relating to water quality, which we know is our number one issue here in Martin County, or quantity, pollution control, pollutant discharge, prevention or removal, and wetlands, preempting such regulation to the state, repealing a provision relating to land management review teams, etc. And that's just the summary of the bill. It was introduced by Senator Burgess. Our own Commissioner Hurd put out that the House Bill 1197, it prohibits, and Senate Bill 1240, prohibits counties from adopting laws, regulations, rules, or policies relating to water quality. She's very concerned about these laws and regulations that preempt local rule, and this is one of them.
Well, and I tell you, this is another great example, kind of like we talked about in the past with the Live Local Act, where we see a conflict between home rule and state preemption based on the idea that certain counties just go way far and above what they should be doing. And I'll give you the example that this one tacks onto an issue we've actually had in Farm Bureau for many years. Down in Miami-Dade County, when agricultural landowners are looking to sell their lands off, Miami-Dade was requiring a level 2 quality inspection of the land. And what that means is that when you go to sell your land, you do a soil test, your first level soil test, and it tells you, okay, here's what your nutrients are in the land. If it's generational nutrients or not. With a level 1, it's a simple test. You have it, you're in and out, and it says either you have nutrient load issues, and then you go to a level 2 test, or your soil looks great, go ahead, sell your land, do what you're going to do. Well, Miami-Dade was requiring everybody to skip 1 on agricultural land, skip 1 and go to 2.
Okay.
Now, when you go to a level 2 test, it's significantly more intrusive. It takes a lot more time, takes a lot more money. So not only are you spending the money on these additional evaluations, but now you have 6 months instead of a couple weeks, or 8, 10, 12 months before you can sell your land, because you won't even have a soil test report yet.
Right.
Real quality
Takes
soil
time.
test. So when places like Miami-Dade automatically require you to go to step 2, when you could have just as easily said, hey, here's my 1 report saying everything's clean and ready to roll, that's a huge issue that home rule has put this additional step on landowners and really gone above what they probably should have done.
Well, I agree. Why add that extra step if it wasn't needed? If step 1 is clean, there's no reason to go to step 2.
Exactly. And I'm not saying that this exact bill tacks onto that, but this is just an example of where some of our local home rules have gone far and above. And like we've said in the past, when you get not just Miami-Dade, when you have 67 counties in the state, even if, a quarter of them, 15 or 18 counties are having these type of issues, the state just gets tired of hearing these arguments consistently coming in front of administrative boards, consistently coming up to the state saying, hey, rectify this issue between the citizens and the county. So there's nothing left to do but, the state step in and say, if you guys cannot be fair and equitable, or not equitable, I hate that term.
Right.
But if you can't be fair in the way you process these disagreements or to process your rules, then we're going to set our rules and say everybody's going to follow them whether they like it or not.
And it's really tough about that, Mike. The preemption is tough. And before I get into that real quick, school board member Amy Pritchett is tuning in. Amy wasn't ignoring you. It's so good to have you joining us again. And she said fear was debris in the dog's eyes if they're hanging their head out the window. And, that is a fear, but...
Of course.
It's something that, my dog likes her head out the window.
Well, and I agree. Everything in life every decision we make in life comes with its own, its own repercussions.
What
about me rolling down the windows and debris gets in my eyes?
Yes.
I mean, my daughter's gotten sand and stuff in her eyes and debris in her eyes rolling with the windows down. I mean, sometimes unfortunate things happen in life.
That's right. Nothing's safe in life.
Exactly.
I was just going to say in all my life, and I'm past 50, folks, I've never had a dog get debris in his eyes by having his head out the window, and I've had dogs all my life. So I'm sure it happens, but
my daughter's 7, and it happened to her.
Things.
So, I mean, sometimes you just get the short end of the stick in life.
Sometimes I just think we just legislate us too much. I mean, it's like, do we have to legislate every aspect of our life, including where my dog's head is?
Well, at some point, we got to recognize that you're never going to achieve perfection. And unfortunately, legislatively, we're trying to get so close to that perfect utopian world that we've lost sight of the fact that this is life, and things are going to happen that aren't going to be fortunate, and you're not going to control
That's
that.
right. Unfortunately, things do happen, but it's a good point. And Amy, there's nobody that loves animals more than Amy. She volunteers out at the Humane Society and appreciate that. As she's also got a full plate.
Her puppy's so sweet, too.
Oh, I know. And her cats. But anyways, let's move on here with some of these bills. And I was going to talk about one, and now I forgot because I got off on the dog
That's all right.
thing. So we'll kind
just
of
pick anyone you like.
We will. We'll just keep rolling on here. So Senate Bill 1360, it's information dissemination. This one's astounded me. Information dissemination, deleting a provision requiring judicial notice of sale to be published from specific. Well, let's just go to the meat and potatoes of that one.
Potatoes of this one.
There's
This
some
was
good stuff in
shocking
it,
to
but
see from Senator Broder. He's usually been a very good stalwart for individual liberties and protections. And as I see this one, I think to myself, maybe this was trying to modernize like we do with journalists and media, credentialed media. It almost feels like it was a modernization because so much of our journalism is done in a digital platform.
It's kind of like a censorship. I mean,
and that's it. So it bears the question to me. It's like, okay, why do we even need to have these credentialed media? I mean,
that's right.
At some point, when you try to modernize some of these older ideals and you put them into the digital era, because how many of us are the volume of people that engage in this type of practice in the digital age, it almost becomes, okay, this isn't a safety concern where everybody gets a media badge to get in the media pool to watch a rocket launch. It's you're sitting at home at your computer offering your opinion. I mean, maybe some rules just need to die.
Right.
I mean,
that's right.
If you're in a physical format, then it makes sense to try to do this for maintaining a certain level of people. You can't have 1 million people from the media show up and demand access to a governor in a meeting.
No, not everybody can put a card around their neck.
If you're going to sit at home on your computer just reviewing records from the state or reviewing data or reviewing bills that are submitted, I mean, if you're going to go that approach, then do we really need to infringe on your right to do so? Why do you need to register for something like that?
Right, you shouldn't have to.
It was very surprising to see that.
That one's introduced and has went nowhere as well. So,
and I think because of how many people engage in this digital offering their opinions in the blogging sphere, because of that, this is, I got a feeling that's going to go absolutely nowhere. It's gained so much attention, and rightfully so in a negative manner. That
bloggers are completely worried about it. I mean, that's the people that are impacted the most.
I mean, that one screams legal challenge. If
Right.
it were to pass, I would guarantee you that's going to be in front of the state Supreme Court and probably at a federal level quicker than not. I would even think that the likelihood of that getting signed would be very low, even if it did go through committee and floors. Especially with the governor looking at other aspirations in the near future,
That's
likely.
right.
I sincerely doubt you see anybody say, okay, I'm going to stamp that one and sign it.
Right. That's good to hear, and I agree with you because it is sitting there. But the next bill, folks, I think all of you are going to be very interested in this next bill because it's Senate Bill 1110, House Bill 477, and it creates term limits, folks, term limits for county commissioners and school board members at 8 years. School board members already are at 12 years, but it will revise that to 8 years. So this is just let you know where it stands right now. It's in the Senate, and Community Affairs being read the first time because I think there was a slight change in the House. It passed the House, 79 yeas, 29 no. Reps Snyder and Overdorf both voted yes for that. So what do you think about this one?
I'm a huge fan of term limits. I really am. I mean, if
Me too.
2 4-year terms is good enough for George Washington, it should probably be good enough for about everybody
That's
else.
right.
And when we look at the state level, we already have these term limits set in place. You got I believe it's, what is it, 4
think
2-year terms in the House. You have obviously 2 8-year terms
Right.
in the governor's
Senate.
office. And something really interesting, a lot of people don't recognize, when Martin County was formed in 1925, we're named after the governor at the time, John Martin.
Good history.
He was a one-term governor because at the time, Florida had a term limit of 1 term. There was no
Oh, isn't that
re-election for
something?
governors back
Okay.
then. And that was, I believe that didn't change until after the 68 Constitution here in the state of Florida. So for a considerable amount of time, you're a one and done. You get in, you do your work, and you get out. So I'm generally a big fan of the idea of term limits. I think maybe a one and done's a little excessive. It does take
It
time
is.
to build relationships in the Capitol and to be able to learn the system.
Yes.
As much as we don't like the idea of a system, it takes
There
time
is
to
one.
learn. But when we have people that spend 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, cough, cough, Bernie Sanders, when we have these people that do these things for
president.
decades, the president, decades at the federal level. I mean, even sometimes we see them in other states where people have unlimited terms.
Oh,
and-
Mike, if we could get term limits at the federal level, I would be Nancy doing that. I have so many candidates that come through this studio and they're like, yes, we want term limits. And then they get elected and it goes out the back door.
That's exactly.
It's unfortunate. And, here locally, this is the one thing with term limits, folks. There are some good commissioners. You may love them, but gosh, it's good to get new ideas in.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
And that's
not
it.
anything personal. It's just I think it's good to have a fresh turnover and new ideas. And
If we're doing banging the same drum over and over again, even if it's great, you're still not growing.
You're
You're
not.
still doing the same thing over and over. And even we talked about this before. In our current commission, there's obviously a 4-to-1 opinion basis. There's
Right.
one very different opinion from the other 4, which I think is an amazing aspect. I would hate to see a straight 5 vote on everything.
so would I.
Because if you're having these uniform, unanimous votes every single time, that means somebody's not critically thinking outside the box.
That's right.
I mean, even if you don't support their ideological basis, you still need someone to ask the question, say why. Justify. Sell me on the idea. Make
Mike,
me a believer.
I could not agree with you more. It's so nice to hear. That's right. Sell me on your idea. Make me a believer. Let's hear the other ideas.
Exactly.
We all shut ourselves in our little box. And if you're a person only watches Fox News or a person only watches CNN, you're only getting one side of the picture. So having a diverse board, I think, is incredibly important.
If you're getting a 75 on every test you take in school, you're still passing, but you'll never be an A student.
That's right.
Sometimes you just got to challenge yourself to go to that next level. And if you're in your own little myopic position, there's no one to challenge you.
And the other thing with that is if you're around with everybody that supports your own position, you're like, yeah, everybody supports me.
Yep.
But you're actually in a bubble of everybody supporting you. It's not
Yes.
so true of the constituents. And we see that here in Martin County. I love Martin County because we're small, but we are a microcosm of national politics. What happens here, you just explode it. Population at 100,000 times nationally.
It's
I mean,
amazing to see, especially when you look at the
what
division
happens
of people
here
in the
happens
county.
everywhere. Yes.
It really is what happens here happens everywhere. In our own Martin County does have its own little bubble, but we have such a diversity of people economically, nationally, just trades, blue collar, white collar, everything you can think of. So to best represent that, if you're stuck in your own little bubble, then you're obviously not representing everybody across the board.
That's absolutely right. So the next bill you've already brought up a little bit, and that's Senate Bill 300, Pregnancy and Parenting Support. And I'm just going to kind of read to you one of the main things about it, and this is from Rachel Cohen of Vox. The state is trying to go further than what was. It was a 15-week abortion ban. If the bill passes and takes effect, as experts thinks it will, likely given the aggressive political climate in the Republicans-controlled state, it would instantly catapult Florida into the ranks of the most restrictive states in the country on abortion access. The proposal not only bans abortion after 6 weeks, but also bans abortion by telemedicine and requires any medication abortion to be dispensed in person, which effectively outlaws mail-order pills. No other state has had a 6-week ban with a requirement for 2 in-person doctor visits and no option for telehealth. While the Florida Senate's bill includes exceptions for rape and incest, the proposed legislation would require anyone claiming those exceptions to provide a copy of a police report, medical record, or court order, even though victims often do not involve law enforcement. The executive director of the Florida Council Against Sexual Violence has called the exceptions meaningless and harmful. And by the way, just to give you a status on that, right now, Senator Harrell was on the Health Policy Committee. She voted yes. The Senate passed it 26-13, and again, she, of course, voted yes. And then in the House, it hasn't voted yet, but it's been added to the special calendar on April 13th. So, my take on that, folks, be honest with you, at 6 weeks, many women don't even know they're pregnant yet. It's very early on. And this is something, as a Republican, I do support the 15-week ban. It's not that I think you should have abortion whenever, and I always support exceptions of rape and incest and a woman's health. But 6 weeks is so detrimental, and we are in a stage. And just to get on my soapbox for one minute, we're in a world where it's not the 1940s or 50s where the husband's taking care of the woman anymore, and she's at home taking care of the family. We have to take care of our own families, and we have to go to work. We have careers, and it's easy for a man to go off to work and go do his thing because the wife was there taking care of the baby. You guys don't have to worry about that. You don't have babies. So there's a lot of things that impact a woman's decision. And myself, I could not do an abortion myself. I can say that personally. But I feel very strongly that I shouldn't be telling my sisters what they have to do with their bodies. So this is a real personal thing to me, even though I may not be impacted personally with it.
Of course.
And I'm not at my age anymore. But I just...
You're only like 10 minutes older than me. What are you talking
yeah,
about?
exactly. Thanks, Mike. But, it's just one of those things. So we're going to see what happens here with this bill. By all indications, we think the governor will sign it, but maybe he won't. I don't know.
Well, like you said, it's passed through the Senate, and the filing deadline for all amendments was last night. So any amendments that you'll find posted online this morning, that was the deadline. There shouldn't be any more amendments.
Oh, good to know.
Be settled
Good to
in,
know.
and that's on the calendar for its reading in the House tomorrow on the House floor.
Right.
I would highly anticipate it's going to pass the House. The governor's already indicated that it's something he's going to stamp. He's probably stamp pretty quick too. So, and this is the point, I'm going to make half your listeners really mad, and then we'll follow that up. It's going to make the rest of everybody else very mad.
With this issue, half to me people disagree and half agree. So.
Yeah, well, everybody's going to be mad at me when I'm done with this. So
okay,
well,
I can't wait to hear. Come on,
This
Mike.
is why I have no intention to run for politics, because I'm going to write both sides of the line, and everybody's going to be angry.
That's right.
I'm opposed to abortion. As a personal statement, and there you go. See, that's why I turned that off. Put that on the floor. I'm opposed to abortion. I think there's a lot of resources out there for people that should they choose they don't want to carry that, or should they choose they don't want to care for that child after its birth. There's so many options out there for people to put them up for adoption, surrogacy. There's financial support services for anybody out there that's concerned they can't feed themselves while pregnant. I mean, there's so many options out there to help somebody out that's in a difficult situation. So on a personal level, I oppose abortion. Having said that, I also recognize that my personal opinion shouldn't dictate your rights to do what you're going to do in life, which is really where I find the difficulty in this matter. I mean, I think that we shouldn't tell people you cannot have an abortion, period. I think there is a reasonable level in there where there should be regulation on it. And this is something for years my wife and I have talked about. It says, why do our infanticide laws not match our abortion laws? And what I mean by that is, let's say I'm on my bicycle and I hit a pregnant woman on accident with my bike and she loses her child. I can be charged for, and let's say she passes and the child passes. I can be charged for 2 homicides by accident. They're manslaughter charges. But if a woman chooses to terminate her pregnancy, there's no matching avenue in that. So I think there's a little bit of an option in here where I personally think the two should match. 6 weeks to me is very early, and I appreciate the idea. I got some very close friends that believe in the fetal heartbeat deadline.
Right.
I personally look at it like, okay, if the child's not viable outside the womb, which right around that 15-week mark, 15 to 20 weeks mark, if you're not viable outside the womb, then I think that's probably the defining line to me where there should be a legal right to have the abortion.
Right.
Again, I'm very much opposed to it. If it's going to cost the mother's life trying to hold the child through, then
Without question.
you have to, if you're going to lose a life, then you need to make practical decisions. So
100%.
But I really have a hard time with abortion personally. But from a legal standpoint, I got to recognize that my moral compass shouldn't dictate what your legal rights and authorities are. And that's where so many people have this issue on the abortion rule, because we do kind of get the fog in our eyes to think, morality says
Right.
this, and this. Well, we have a long history in this nation with certain laws that aren't necessarily moral. I mean,
Right.
go back to the 1850s, and I can give you a whole list of them.
Right. I know you could.
So it's a very difficult line to walk, but that's why it's so important that we have meaningful discussions on it. And unfortunately, I think right now what we're seeing is a strict party line decision-making process on this. I mean, it's very clear what side supports what and what side doesn't. If you don't believe me, take a look at certain high-level Democrats who were arrested in Tallahassee last week because of this bill, protesting this bill.
Nikki Fried, Lauren Book, Senator
Yeah, that's
Lauren
right.
Book.
So, it's clear that this is a party line, which makes you question how much substantive discussion is actually taking place on the matter. And I mean, the Republican Party, and I've been a registered Republican for, I'd have to take off my shoes to count how many years. But, this is something that I really have a hard time understanding, because I think the Republican Party's really letting their conservative ideals get in the way of their constitutional and liberty-minded foundation.
Right.
It's at some point the Conservative Party or the Republican Party needs to recognize, not locally per se, but just on a national level, we need to recognize, all right, are we the conservative party or are we the constitutional party? Because especially on something like we look at drugs, for example, or we look at abortion, for example, some of these hot topic buttons, that is two very different principles, a conservative principle versus a constitutional principle. And I will say this, there is no constitutional protection for abortions.
Well, that was the whole argument with reversing Roe v. Wade. And by the way, folks, I don't mind anything that Mike is saying. I love this dialogue. This is what America's about. We have differing opinions.
But respectful of it.
But respectful of it. And, that's one thing with Roe v. Wade is like put it back to the states. And this was the fear, though, from women across the country that this is what would happen. All of a sudden, abortion rights are taken away 6 weeks. We're not even knowing about it. So when they stripped that Roe v. Wade, this is what we feared, and this is what's happening now in Texas as well.
So SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, they make pretty much every decision is based on an administrative platform. It's not really for the quantity or the quality of the argument, but it takes a look specifically at how administratively it is applied. And when we look at Dobbs, for example, the question was, does the state have the authority to make these decisions? And what SCOTUS does is they compare that to what's established, whether it be the actual Constitution from 1787 or any of the 27 amendments we have following. And originally, Roe v. Wade in the 1970s was based off the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment, which is what we see for race, gender, sexual orientations, such like that. But the choice or the determination on abortion, applying that into the 14th Amendment, what the Supreme Court said was the 14th Amendment does not say anything about the individual choice of the person, which is really where things got sticky, because by doing that, they kicked it back to the states, saying the states have the authority to regulate these things. Recall in the Bill of Rights, any right that is not enumerated specifically to the federal government or to the citizen is enumerated to the states. That's the 9th and the 10th Amendments of the Constitution. So because there is nothing in the Constitution saying you have a right to an abortion or you have the individual right to choice over their body in that particular manner, because there's no Equal Protection Clause, 14th Amendment application, then it means it reverts back to the states' rights to do this. And I mean, there's a lot of people that had this fear the states are going to become extremely restrictive, and those fears are coming true. I make no bones about it. There are states that are getting very restrictive on this matter, and that is a bit concerning to many people. And again, I'm on the fence on that matter. But
and I think too, the Republican Party, I wish they'd step back and take a breath a little bit. Again, I was good with Roe v. Wade. I was good with our 15-week limit. But sometimes when you take things too far, I think You know, 48% of the country is heavily to the left, 52% is heavily to the right. And we got this 4% in the middle that really, their votes is what ends up mattering in the elections. And when you start going too far one way or the other, you're disenfranchising those voters in the middle. And I think you just need to be careful with those things. And I think that's what's happening with this bill.
And I would even say, to your point, I think you're 100% right looking at those people in the middle, but I would suggest that 4% is probably more in the neighborhood of 40, 50, 60%. You know, we have people that are registered Republican, people that are registered Democrat, and a very few that are registered Independent. But people are forced into these two-party systems, either choosing Republican, choosing Democrat. But when you look at the issues themselves, the vast majority of issues people identify right up in the middle of it. Most people identify as these independent, libertarian, or
They do.
you know, some of the more extreme parties as well. A lot of people identify in a whole slew of political categories, but they register within one of the two major parties because truth is we're a two-party system.
It's about the only way you have a vote.
Absolutely.
And, you know, the other thing with that, too, is when with the abortion bill and with Republican rights, I was going to go and make a point of there, and it just, the phone rang, and it just took my thought process right off there. I know, it's like, it was a really good point, too. But this is what I was going to say. I know exactly. I should throw mine on the floor. But one of the things with the Republican Party I like, and the reason why I identify most is they're like, they want smaller government, less intrusive into your lives, except for my body. That I don't get.
Well,
but that's what I like about the Republican Party. It's less intrusive in government, and but there's there's things you got to look at all sides. But that's where I always identify more
at
to
the
the right.
local level. We're a little less in this category, and the more we get in the state and the federal level, it becomes a little more apparent. But the Republican Party is a party of limited government, except where it is when it's something that fits their narrative. Right. And ironically, the Democrat Party is just the same. They love the idea
100%.
of limited government if it's counterintuitive to what they want.
Right.
You know, this is there's a great flip, and I talk about this all the time with Civil War, right? When we talk about going into the Civil War, we talk about states' rights, and so many people say that it was all about states' rights by the South. Ironically, prior to the Civil War, the centralized federal government was very heavy-handed in favor of the Southern slavery movement. Most Southern Democrats were the ones that were running the federal government. So the South absolutely loved the idea of a centralized federal government. There was no idea of these states' rights in the South prior to the election of Abraham Lincoln as the first Republican. The North was actually very much in favor of states' rights, and the North, in many occasions, their state laws were specifically written to counter the Southern Democrat laws of the federal government.
Okay.
So the states of the Northern Union were extremely states' rights until the federal government switched to Republican Abraham Lincoln, at which point the Union was now in favor in the centralized government, and now all of a sudden the South said, whoa, we don't like this federalism anymore. This is where we have our states' rights. So it's very dangerous to get tied into these two-party systems of we love small government when it's in our favor, because the election at 1860 in November said, hey, guess what? Your favorite just changed overnight.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it does happen just
all the time.
I mean, we just had a Republican president. I mean, it goes back and forth all the time. The pendulum
what a
swings.
Change between November of 20, or was it 20, and January 21.
Yes.
Mean, that's overnight, essentially.
You want to talk
January
about a big
20th,
change.
Overnight, well, January 6th. But,
lots of changes, yeah.
January 20th, overnight, we went from everybody loves central government to everybody hates central government, or vice versa.
Yep. The borders opened up, and men that identified as women started competing against women in sports the day of. I mean, it was just, I know, I can go, okay.
Man.
All right, hold on. I'm going to, I know, hold on. I know I'm going off topic here. A couple questions. Jackie Pekanis, thank you so much for tuning in. She says, I think our country has lost its moral compass, and we're seeing the result of it in our society. Oh, my goodness. Yes, sister. Yes, I couldn't agree more. We have lost our moral compass.
The best thing I could say on that is, I was a supporter of President Trump, both the first time and the second time. And everybody that says, how can you support a man like that? I would just simply say, I'm not asking him to take my daughters to prom or chaperone their school. He's not the moral authority in my household. Me and my wife, we are the moral authorities in our household. I can't negotiate interstate trade or foreign regulations. I'm not going to have a talk with the president of Paris or president of France. That's not my role.
Right.
Now, I'd prefer a person like President Trump to do something like that. that doesn't mean that the moral authority in my household comes from the government. It's absolutely reversed. My moral authority stays in my household, comes from my household. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people have allowed politics to get so intertwined into their life that they've lost sight of this. We are the moral authorities of our lives in our community. The president's not going to land his helicopter in my front yard, but if I tick off my neighbor, I'm going to know about it before dinner. That's
right.
just the way life is. So I think we really need to start putting that first and foremost. Everything we do needs to be our moral authority.
I agree with you 100%. It really does start at home. And actually, I had an issue with my daughter at school with politics. And I'm like, no, please, just educate. Please, let's leave the politics out of the school for right now. And, when they're older, it's going to be a fire hose of politics on them. But in school, let's concentrate on,
it's
academics
funny,
and sports.
In school, one of the issues right now in the state is getting rid of the DEI, or the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in our collegiate levels, which are these are kind of tied in with a lot of federal issues as well. Public schools that are receiving federal dollars, federal grant dollars, are required to have some of these programs.
That's another bill I didn't bring up, was the school voucher bill. But
when we look at these programs, I ask myself, okay, why are we trying to get rid of DEI? If you have a program, DEI program, for example, and you're trying to become more inclusive, you're trying to be more understanding of what's going on, or to increase diversity within your education systems, I think these are great things. If you have a broken system, or if you have somebody who's applying this in a discriminative manner, then you address the issue itself. You don't just say, okay, my car's got a flat tire, so all right, time to buy a new car. Okay, that's a little extreme,
Right.
I can get a plug kit at Walmart for $5 and use the compressor. You can fix things that are broken. You don't just simply throw something out the window. And, unfortunately, I think politics and education has become a bit of this issue. There are people that are just very divisive in their political discussion process.
Right.
Like we just showed, we have two very different opinions on the topic, and do it in a respectful manner. I'm going to walk away with a better understanding. You're going to walk away with a better understanding. Or we're both just going to walk away.
Right.
That's the two options. There's no reason.
And we're going to talk next time we see each other.
Exactly.
And we're going to do more shows.
And that's it. So I think we really have gotten away from this more. Talking about morality, we've gotten away from doing things in a moral manner. It's okay to have a disagreement. That doesn't make the other guy evil. You can disagree with them, but it doesn't make them evil.
I think social media has something to do with that. There's so many keyboard warriors. They can say things and do things and post these foolish memes without consequences.
Oh yeah.
And it's just so divisive. There's just times I hate social media. You have to be on it, but gosh.
We talk about it in the cigar industry all the time. You can't yell at somebody with a cigar on your lip. If you do, you're going to end up with a burn in your lap.
I'm not going to start smoking cigars, Mike. All right.
No, it's quite all right. But if you yell at somebody with a cigar on your lip, it's going to fall down your lap and you're going to get burned. So it forces you to sit down and have a discussion.
Right.
And I think that's kind of where we lost sight. Not saying everybody needs to go out and have a cigar. That's your own personal choice. Whatever vices you want. I got a few of them myself. But whatever it is, it's like, have a polite discussion. Have a discussion with somebody like a human being. Treat them like a human being. And if they're going to treat you like a jerk, and if they're going to give you trouble, walk away.
That's right.
You know what?
Just walk away.
The same thing we tell our 5-year-olds is just as true when you're 50.
100%. I think our nation has forgotten that. Shane Snavely. Shane is going to be on in 2 weeks. And folks, I encourage you to tune into that show. He's going to be talking about the Capitol Hill, January 6th. Folks want to call it an insurrection, whatever you want to call it that day. But he's got some information I think you're going to be pretty interested in. And Shane's up in that area. He's in that environment. He's up in Virginia, right outside of D.C. So he, as you can see, if you're on Facebook, he's political operative. He's an insider up there that kind of knows what's going on. Shane says a larger issue is when legislators heavily restrict abortion. They need to also institute many new services for children into the system. There are thousands of children that are not being adopted into the system. With less abortion, there needs to be more programs also adopted to care for those children. And that's true. I think that's a lot of women's complaint if they do decide, because there's a mental issue there that giving up your child, it's not an easy thing.
Yeah.
So I praise women that do that, by the way. It's a tough thing. Emotionally, it's big deal. But if you choose to keep your baby, there does need to be more supportive services.
There should be, and unfortunately in our country, this goes beyond just abortion. You know, it's a big issue as well. Within the realm of firearms, we talk about mental health concerns, mental health issues. You know, unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of mental health services, local, state, federal level, just across the board. Our mental health services are pretty well lacking, and there's a lot of things that go into this. Let me just start with that. There's a lot of things that go into mental health services. People that don't want them or don't recognize that they need them. There's a lot of times where, unfortunately, mental health services are reactionary. So unless you demonstrate, for example, schizophrenia, for example, in many areas you cannot receive services, psychiatric services for schizophrenia until you've demonstrated a schizophrenic break or you've demonstrated that you're having these issues. So if you have a bipolar disorder and you feel like you have a situation coming on, your body's telling you, hey, listen, I'm about ready to have a negative effect. It's not as easy as you think to get checked into psychological services or psychological help services. So we really need to do a better job as a nation taking a look at some of these. And again, I'm going to make a lot of people mad by saying this. We also need to take a look at psychological and mental health issues and stop saying, hey, it's okay to feel how you feel. For example, I'm thinking of like gender dysphoria, for example. You know, we cannot sit back and accept that mental health service or mental health conditions or situations are automatically everything is accepted and okay. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with you. You're not wrong for having these issues. There's nothing I'm not saying that one bit. But recognizing that there is an issue at play,
right,
and not just saying, "Oh, it's cool, don't worry about it, sweep it under the rug." You know, this just when we kick the can down the field on these type situations, if it's benign to begin with, and we kick it down the field, then all of a sudden it becomes an issue. You know, there's a lot of information still hasn't been released yet for the Covenant School shooting in Tennessee, but there's been some very heavy hints set up front that the shooter had some mental health issues, not just an issue with gender dysphoria, but other mental health issues as well. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is that in many cases, we kick this can down the field saying, hey, you're great the way you are, everything's perfect, everything's great, you're just not the same as everybody else. And again, you know, not all of us are the same. And I'm not saying that you're bad for having a disconnect between how you emotionally or psychologically feel versus how you physically are. There's nothing wrong with that, but you need to recognize that, okay, there is something here that is not typical. And when things are not typical, that usually leads to, okay, how do we conform a non-typical situation into a society that requires conformity? I mean, realistically, we live in a society which in itself, society requires a certain level of conformity. So if we could just continue to kick the can down the field and ignore problems, then nobody should sit back shocked when problems arise.
So, and that is very true. And I talk about the gender, or you're talking about gender dysphoria. And, you know, that's one thing I just can't believe in society today, that we actually question what a gender is. No matter what you feel personally, a boy has a physical, makeup, and a female girl has a physical makeup. It shocked me. I went to the TSA to apply for my daughter, and the questions about what you do if you don't know what gender you are on the TSA was astounding to me. I'm like, no matter how you feel in your skin, there's still a gender. Yeah. I don't know how you say, I don't know what I am, or I can choose whatever I want. That's not how
20
gender
years
works.
ago, we were talking about, women can do anything a man can do plus some. And it's 100% true. I cannot think of a single thing that I can do that a woman can't.
Right.
I mean, I really cannot. I can think of a couple things that women can do that I absolutely cannot. I
Right.
mean, I have two children in school that obviously are from a situation that women can do that I cannot.
That's exactly right.
Know? So why is it we would mix this idea of the physical being of whether you're male or you're female and mix that with saying, okay, well, I might be physically a male, but I identify as a female.
Right.
Well, what makes that identification? Why is it any different?
Right.
And again, not trying to say that there's anything wrong with that, but nevertheless, that is a disconnect between the psychological and the physical realities.
Right.
So, I mean, it's really gotten out of hand, in my personal opinion, how far we've come with some of this stuff.
In a short amount of time, I think how long it
short
took to
amount
get
of
women's
time.
rights. And
I mean, it's just, we take a look at women in sports, for example. I mean, this idea that biological men can compete in women's sports and it is accepted as A-OK. biological men have a very different physical, muscular makeup
right.
than females.
Or a woman taking man's hormones,
Exactly.
testosterone.
I mean, there's no. Einstein used to say, if you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, you're always going to call it a failure. Well, I mean, if we're going to judge women by how well they can stand up to men in physical sports, then there's going to be a disadvantage to that. Not in all cases. There's some women that can bench press me, and that is fantastic for them. I am not a strong man. I'm a weakling. And there are some strong women that can lift cars. And there are some men out there that can flip the car over with the woman still sitting inside.
Right.
I mean, we all have physical differences.
Right.
But when we're talking about broad scale stuff, especially when we're talking about sports and in an academic setting where there's scholarships involved, I mean, we're allowing this psychological idea to interfere with the physical makeup of bodies where now we're giving preferential treatment. In my opinion, and that's a very dangerous precedent to set.
Well, and the other thing, I ran across a post the other day. I'm kind of putting a little collage together that I'm going to make a statement about at some point, but I'll spill some of it now. But there was a Miss Nevada transgender 2021. It's like, okay, look, a lot men can really look pretty when you put makeup on them.
Sure.
So, and I understand she's transgendered and whatnot, but it's like, for us women, we fought so hard for equal rights.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like all of a sudden, in sports and beauty pageants, and even the scientific community was trying to get 2 male mice to reproduce. I mean, it's like, what's going on here, women?
Why
And
do we
so
need
many
to play
women
God
support
in so many things? I mean, I just don't get it.
Let it be.
I mean, I'm all about progress. I'm all about making sure we're doing things for the betterment of mankind and moving forward. But some things you just don't need to play with. I mean...
Couple comments here. Jan Mozingo, how you doing, Jan? True, babies are easier. Found out about a baby last week and had her adopted in 3 days. It's wonderful. On Good Friday, actually. That's actually really touching.
Beautiful.
Another family got a baby from Jacksonville on the same day. Another friend is getting a baby next month. There were 4 families wanting the baby. We don't want any children unloved or unwanted. And no, that's true. And I wish all babies were adopted like that. It doesn't always happen like that, but that is beautiful stories there. And that's God working for those families. And Jackie, I worked in the mental health profession, and services are very difficult to come by if a person has no insurance.
See, and even the insurance system itself or the finances of things itself, I mean, so many things. Unfortunately, money has become the root of all evil. And those who have are able to get a lot, and those who don't simply don't. So it's unfortunate to see that finance have gotten so in the way. And it's expensive. Things in life are expensive, no doubt about it, especially when you talk about mental health, because it's a very elongated period of time. It's not something where you simply wake up, you take yourself a vitamin, and now you have mental health issues are gone.
Right.
It takes a considerable amount of time to address some of these concerns. And, of course, everything costs money. So it's a shame to see how finances have gotten involved like that.
So we were talking about bills and I've gotten way sidetracked, but I've really enjoyed the conversation, Mike.
Me too.
So, but there's one other bill I did want to cover before we go off air. We have 5 minutes left, and that is, of course, the Live Local Act, Senate Bill 102. That is a bill that is already signed by the governor.
That's
so,
right.
Folks, it's done.
Can't call it a bill anymore.
Nope.
It's a law.
Yeah, it's a law now, and. It pretty much passed by everybody. Senate was 40-0.
Flew through.
Only 6 House of Representatives voted against it. All of our local representatives voted for it. But tell us a little bit about this bill, Mike.
So this one here, I know there's so much concern about preemption in this one, and especially in our local community, one of the big issues that was concerned was the height limit aspect. And I will say this amendment was filed on the House side out of Miami. I think Ms. Buceta Cabrera. She specifically enumerated what it is I think the Senate intended was that it sticks to the height limits that are maximum allowed for those residential commercial applications. So for example here in Stewart, when we talk about the special hospital district having a significantly increased elevation height.
107 feet for the hospital.
Yeah. So with that amendment, what that does is you cannot use that as a comparable analysis to the height limits for some of these structures. So you're not going to be able to build an apartment complex at 100 plus feet. You're going to be capped off at that 40-foot height.
That's good news. I didn't realize there was an amendment on that. You just told me something nobody else has, and
so
that's fabulous.
About half of the bill was all what's called legislative intent, which is a real fancy way of saying this is what we mean to do. So if we misspelled or we wrote in something that didn't make any sense,
this was one of those.
Here's what we intend to do.
Odd little circumstances.
Exactly. It's the way of saying we rushed this through. We wrote it overnight.
Well, and not everybody has one building in an entire county that's higher than any other.
Exactly. So what that does is that takes away the opportunity to use the one extreme example and to push that across the board. So
Yes.
that's a very good thing to see. And again, it's a law now, so there's nothing we're going to do about it, at least over the course of the next 10 years when there's a,
Right.
I don't want to say a sunset, but a renewal vote that's supposed to take place. But again, I don't see this being much of an issue here in Martin County because we have a very development-friendly atmosphere currently. And more importantly, because of the criteria that it sets for X amount of affordable housing units, and we have such a high median income already in Martin County, developers simply, I have a hard time seeing them committing themselves to such a limited profit or probably more
See, I don't know
likely
if that's
no
so,
profit.
though, Mike, because the affordable housing limit is so high. I mean, I think for a studio or one bedroom, it was $1,600 and change, but up to a two bedroom was $2,500 a month. That's not. A lot of people are like, "Whoa, that is not even close to affordable." But that's 40% of what that builder builds has to fall in that range, which is still pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked to see what our market rates are going recently here in Martin County, but I do know that $2,500 is a lot of money.
It's going that high.
So but that's it. How many other units are already well over that? And in
Right.
an already friendly atmosphere like Martin County, why stick yourself to a 30-year commitment at that affordable rate if you can get approved
Well, the
anyway
tax
without
breaks.
dealing with it?
The tax breaks.
Yeah, that's true. I can see where tax breaks, tax incentives be pushed for.
Impact fees. There's impact fees.
Too.
It's
So, I mean,
a tremendous amount.
You can make you can make
Yes.
your impact fees disappear.
For 30
hundreds of
years, I
thousands,
think it is.
yeah,
Yes.
$100,000 impact fees
Yes.
you make disappear. So,
Yes.
yeah.
So we just got a minute here. So Jan says, great job. She loves talking, hearing from you, and said, what a great speaker. She's going to start following you. So,
thank you.
And I know a lot of people will. I know what Mike said, and it's the same reason Mike said, I don't fall 100% down a party line one way or the other.
No.
So if I ever ran for election, there'd be all kinds of sound bites to sit there and say, why not to vote for her?
There'd be
But
pitchforks everywhere.
They're
That's okay.
exactly. So, but I have always encouraged. I thought, boy, he'd be a wonderful representative. So maybe we'll get you to change your mind here. But anyways, Mike Syrkus. Yeah, okay. For now,
Never
I enjoy
say
having
never,
you.
but I
Right.
wouldn't hold my breath either.
Well, I'm going to keep having you on the radio, so I appreciate that.
I
You
enjoyed the
always
conversation.
100%. You bring so much great knowledge. Love it. We'll be back again. I'll have you back in about a month or so, and we'll talk maybe a little bit more about what's local. And by then, session will be over.
Sounds good.
All right. Next week, I'm going to have Greg Braun on from the Guardians of Martin County. Hope you can tune in then and stay dry. Have a great day.